Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. Today we're going to be taking a look at more Warlock spells. This is going to be part 2. I actually have tried to record this video 2 or 3 times already. Well, 3 to be honest. And each time it got to like 40 plus minutes and I wasn't even done yet. So I decided, I'm like, we're just going to make a part 2 and a part 3. So this one's going to be looking at our Mystic Arcanum, our 6th to 9th level spell choices. Part 3 is going to be looking at the packed magic spells. So we'll just go through all the different Warlock packs and what spells get added to your spell list. And we'll just go through every choice in that case, because there's not that many. I want to mention, though, right off the bat, that there are some problems with our Mystic Arcanum. And that is mostly that we only get one of each spell level. And so some spells might be like excellent spells. Like we'll take a look at Astral Projection, for example, right? Astral Projection is awesome. And if you need to go to the Astral Plane, that's the way you want to do it. But do you really want that to be your only 9th level spell? Like, how often are you really going to the Astral Plane? Now, maybe you're in a campaign where you're just doing a bunch of like domain or dimension hopping, essentially, right? I ran a campaign like that once, and it was really fun. The players really enjoyed it, and so things like that were really great. But I also ran one where I just gave the players a high level NPC. Players were already 16th level, I think, when they met her, or 15th level, and she was just this high level warlock, and I gave her like plane shift, demi plane, and astral projection. And the idea that she was just going to be mostly their tour guide, and she was going to join up with the party and take them around to these different places. And she was less of a combatant and more of a planar traveler with a lot of experience, and she could defend herself. She wasn't terrible in combat or anything, but the idea was that she wasn't going to be doing all the heavy lifting for the party. She was just going to help them get around and maybe give me a chance to, kind of help bring out some of the magic of these different areas. So I think that a lot of times if your campaign is going to involve this kind of stuff, the DM is probably going to give you a way to do it anyways. So I don't know, even though I love Astral Projection as a spell, on a wizard, you could be like, hey, we're going to go to the Astral Plane tomorrow. And you're like, okay, well, I need to take a long rest then and swap out my spells and prepare Astral Projection. With the Warlock, it's the exact opposite. It's like, hey guys, are we going to the Astral Plane tomorrow? No. Why do you keep asking? Oh, no reason. I'll just cast Eldritch Blast again, Because what else you got then? That's your only 9th level spell. Anyways, enough preamble. This is why the videos were 40 minutes long in my original attempts. Let's just jump right into it. Level 6, Arcane Gate. This immediately falls into that category we were just talking about. It's a good spell, but it's like a short range teleport. I mean, it's decent range actually, but it's not like teleport where you can go pretty much anywhere, right? It's like 800 feet, I think, is the maximum range, or 600 feet, something like that. So, I mean, it is a good distance, but this is the only 6th level spell you have, and you can only cast it once per long rest. Like, do you really need to teleport 4 or 5 or 600 feet every single day? That it was that crucial? Again, this is a spell that's better probably on someone else, and I just feel like you have better choices with the 6th level spell. So what are those other choices? Well, I like Conjure Fey and Create Undead, both falling into that same category. And that's if you're going to play that stable of pets type concept that I mentioned yesterday. You go Pact of the Chain, you take a bunch of summons and conjure elemental from the one invocation, whatever it's called, I can't remember anymore. You take those kind of things and just build this little pet army. Then I think that these spells are both excellent additions to that, especially if you're using things like we use Tome of Beasts and Creature Codex in our campaigns. So that gives you 2 more third-party books with 600-ish monsters each. I think it's 600. And that just gives you a lot more things to choose from. The Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual doesn't really give you a lot of Fey options, but, there are a few. But it gets a lot better if you start incorporating more Fey. Eye Bite is an excellent debuff. You got 3 different effects you can choose from. They're all pretty good. But I feel like Mental Prison and Mass Suggestion are both even better. Mental Prison is a really nice spell. The only problem with Mental Prison is that Mass Suggestion is probably even better. It's one of the best 6th level spells in the entire game. It's pretty hard to go wrong with Mass Suggestion. I also like all the investiture spells from Xanatars are okay, but I do feel like investiture of stone is worth mentioning if you want to play like a Pact of the Blade Warlock. Giving yourself resistance to every damage type can be pretty powerful. So I do think that, there's at least an argument to be made there. And it has a few other riders too, which are okay. But mostly you're probably going to take it for the damage reduction. And, it is pretty good at that. I wanted to mention Circle of Death as well, because I have kind of a love-hate relationship with this spell. I always see people take this spell, and I gotta say, like, the damage on it is really weak for a level 6 spell. I mean, technically, Fireballs, it does the same damage as Fireball, but your Fireball would actually do more, because it's going to scale up to 5th level spell slot. So your Fireball would be doing more damage than this, and it's going to come back on a short rest, instead of a once per day long rest spell. But, that being said, necrotic damage, while still being more resistant than some, is not as bad as fire. And the area of effect on Circle of Death is massive. Like, you can just, if you look on a map, you're like, oh, how big is that? And you look out your area of Circle of Death, it's huge. Like, you can wipe out entire armies practically with it almost, it seems. Well, at least a small tribe. Let's put it that way, maybe not an entire army. But it's massive. So I do see why some people might think, hey, you know what? I don't have a lot of AoE damage. I'm going to take Circle of Death, and then I've got a big AoE I can throw down. I think that's a pretty solid choice. But if I was like a Pact of the Fiend and I had Fireball already, I don't know that I'd bother with Circle of Death. You've only got one 6th level spell. At least, though, for the combat spells, you can be pretty assured that you're going to be getting to a fight at least once a day. You might not be going to the astral plane once a day. Level 7. There's only 3 that I thought really stood out to me, but they're all excellent spells. The first of them being the best, and that is Force Cage. Force Cage is amazing. No concentration. There's no saving throw. They do get a saving throw to try to escape if they have a way of doing so, like a teleport or some sort of like plane shift or something like that. But the spell is ridiculously good. I've talked about this before, but in the last campaign I ran, our White Spire campaign, the party's wizard used Force Cage to completely change the course of several different fights against some high-level, powerful enemies. There was one where they were fighting this Drow matriarch, and she had a ton of underlings, like low-level guards, mid-level guards. She had like wizard subordinates that were casting counterspell on the party members and stuff. Like, it was a tough fight. They also had like a hallucinatory terrain trap set up where the party's paladin went like, she cast Misty Step so she could like get even further, and that dropped her into the quicksand trap. Glorious. But anyways, so they had like these kind of things, and it was a tough fight, and things were not going good for the party in round 1. Let me tell you. But round 2, the bard and the wizard decide, hey, I'm going to cast Dimension Door and move you over by the matriarch, and you, or whichever one decided, let's cast Dimension Door and get over there. The other one said, okay, and then we're going to slam a Force Cage on her. And the fact that they were able to remove the most powerful combatant on the enemy team from the battle so early was a complete game changer. And she even had plane shift, so she tried to cast it and escape, and even though she had like 20 charisma, she failed her saving throw because the wizard's spell save DC was so high. So in the next round, she had to cast plane shift again in order to escape, and then by the time she got back, it was like round 4 or 5 of the combat, and things had completely fallen apart for her. Most of her minions were dead. The NPC wizards that were trying to counterspell the party members, dead. She had like 3 or 4 guys left, and that was it. And they were very easily able to clean up the rest of the fight and kill her as well. And so he took a fight that had been going terribly for the PCs in round 1 and 2, and just completely, almost single-handedly, not quite, but almost single-handedly reversed the course of the battle. They also fought this like one archdevil later on, and they force caged him, and he escaped as well. But it was a similar situation. While he was trying to escape from the force cage, and he ended up failing his saving throw, and then had to use a legendary save to pass in order to escape. But by then, he's now using high-level spell slots and using his actions on this kind of stuff, and the party's like wiping out everything else. So I mean, even in a worst-case scenario, the wizard traded his 7th level spell for the NPC's 7th level spell and the NPC's legendary saving throw, and basically their entire round. So I mean, it is ridiculous, and especially against like powerful like hand-to-hand type combatants, things that don't really have any good range attacks. We've had several times where we're just like, hey, this thing hits really hard. Let's just force cage it and then just shoot it with range attacks through the bars. And yeah, it's not very sporting, but I mean, hey, this isn't the Olympics, I mean, you just got to win at all costs. So, sporting or not sporting, that's what we did. It's just an excellent spell. The second one I wanted to talk about was Plane Shift. And Plane Shift is also quite good. In fact, it's even good for getting out of force cages, it turns out. The problem with Plane Shift is that it allows a saving throw against one of its best effects, which is the ability to crowd control something and just move them out of the battle, kind of like force cage. Because it gives a saving throw, it's nowhere near as good in that regard. Especially because they could use a legendary saving throw at high levels. I mean, if you're looking at 7th level spells, you're going to be fighting things that have legendary resist. Maybe not every time, but you're going to be meeting some, right? So you have to bear that in mind. Am I going to use this on the main bad guy? Because he might have legendary saving throws. And, so that's just kind of wasted. However, the fact that you can also use it kind of like an astral projection and travel to different places gives it this a lot more versatility than what astral projection has, right? You can use it as a travel spell and you can use it as a crowd control. And I think that gives it a lot more viability for my only choice of 7th level spell slot. Now, is it as good as Force Cage? No, probably not. But I can see an argument for it. Maybe you are in one of these kind of like plane hopping type campaigns. If so, Plane Shift is an excellent choice. The last one is Crown of Stars. I feel like this is the weakest of the three, but it's still a really good spell. So, you just get to shoot out magic like star shuriken at things and just do damage as a bonus action. And the fact that it's a bonus action and it just kind of remains and you just shoot them out is pretty nice because it's not competing then with your further spell casting, right? It's not like, trying to cast something and also trying to cast Hex or whatever else, you're just firing off magic damage things, and it is pretty good, but it's not as good as Force Cage. Level 8, Demiplane. Demiplane is another one of these great spells that just probably isn't great on Warlocks. It's the same thing as Astral Projection. Do you really need to access your Demiplane every single day? Because that's kind of how I look at it. I only have this spell once per long rest, and it's the only spell of this level that I have. So, sure, Demiplane is a great spell. In fact, I even talked about, and when I talked about uses of wishes, and people complaining about how, wishes are great, but I just never use my wish spells because I don't want to waste them. And I was like, man, you can't waste a wish. If you finish your adventuring for the day and you didn't use your wish for something, then take your long rest and get it back again. And, you could clone yourself. You could cast Demiplane. You could put your clone of yourself from yesterday in your Demiplane, whatever, right? Like, there's so many great things you can do with that. And Demiplane itself is an amazing spell. But if it's the only spell of that level I have, I just don't think it's what I'm going to go with. So, again, that's not that Demiplane is bad. It's excellent. But I just probably don't need it once a day, every day, Dominate Monster, on the other hand, is pretty good. But again, it's that kind of like save or nothing, like all or nothing, save or suck is what I meant to say. And, those can be kind of troublesome sometimes. Feeble Mind falls into that same category. I really want to like Feeble Mind because it's such a powerful debuff. But again, lots of things at this level have legendary saves. And if you're trying to cast on somebody who needs to have high intelligence in order to cast spells or high charisma to cast spells, like if you're casting on an enemy Warlock, that could be okay. They probably don't have a high intelligence, so maybe it's a good choice there. But if you're casting on like a Lich, they probably have legendary saves. They probably have a good intelligence save in general. Again, this is your only spell for the day at 8th level. You kind of want it to be good. That brings us to glibness. Glibness is really interesting because basically if you have to make a charisma check of any sort, you just automatically get a 15 on it. Now, you probably have a really high charisma to begin with because you're a 15th or higher level warlock by the time you can cast 8th level spells. So your ability score check or your ability checks for charisma are probably through the roof. So if you're ever just like, hey, I don't want to worry about failing it, and maybe you'll let the party face and it's a really social campaign and you're going to be casting glibness a lot, I think it's a good choice. If you're in a dungeon campaign and you're occasionally going to need glibness, probably not a very good choice. But in certain campaigns, I think it's really good. There's also kind of a weird thing too, where let's say you have glibness on, and then you want to cast counterspell. Glibness specifically states ability checks that are using your spellcasting attribute. And as a warlock, that's your charisma. So this is a charisma ability check, which means that if you cast counterspell on somebody, the absolute worst you can do is a 15 plus all your modifiers. So that's actually a pretty good combination. I just don't know that it's really worth using your only 8th level spell and one of your pact spells on counterspell. But, you know, if you really needed to counterspell something, you really need it. Maybe you're going up against some sort of like arc, maybe you're fighting Vecna or something, and you're like, we cannot afford to fail these counterspells. I'm casting glibness, and I'm using all my spell slots on counterspells. You know, could be worse. But as I said, I think that it's a little more niche and probably not as good overall. So my favorite spell at 8th level is Maddening Darkness. It's a nice AoE spell. It's kind of like the big brother of Hungering Hadar, to be honest. I think it's an excellent spell. I especially like it combined with Warlock's, Repelling Blast and Grasp of Hadar, your ability to move things and reposition yourself and then push them back in. That actually becomes a very fun playstyle, by the way. Using your movement to try to flank somebody so that you can Repelling Blast them back into your AoE effect. It's pretty funny. And, it becomes a lot more strategic. It's like you're playing chess almost in some ways. So I really like Maddening Darkness. I think it's probably the best of your 8th level spells. And being a combat spell, it's something you're going to be using a lot, probably. Level 9. I at least have to mention Astral Projection. We've already talked about a bunch, so there's no point going into detail. Like I said, in certain campaigns, you're probably going to need it. But in 95% of them, leave it for somebody else to take it, or hope that the DM gives you some sort of plot contrivance, because you're just not going to be going to the astral plane every day, probably, or even close, So what will you need then? Well, I like Foresight a lot. My first instinct with Foresight was that it would be really good on Blade Locks, which, by the way, it is. Not saying it's not. It's amazing on Blade Locks. But the big bad in my King in Yellow campaign, besides the King in Yellow himself, who never actually got released because the party stopped that from happening, that was actually the victory condition. If the King in Yellow got loose, the game was over and the universe got destroyed. So the party kind of knew this going in. You're not going to fight the King in Yellow. You have to prevent him from escaping, because if he escapes, it's over, But his main servant was the Golden Queen, who was a level 20 warlock. Now the party was level 17 when they fought her, so this isn't as crazy as it sounds. But she had a bunch of level 15 and 16 minions and underlings and stuff, and it was a really tough fight. It was very close. But one of the things that she did was she cast Foresight on herself. So she had advantage on all of her attacks, and they had disadvantage to hit her. And when you're firing off 4 Eldritch Blasts around with advantage on every attack, that starts to become very significant. I mean, the party started literally using counter spells on Eldritch Blast. You might think, hey, using counterspell on a cantrip is ridiculous, but not when you're hitting that hard and that often. She was critting, maybe I was just rolling well, but she seemed like she crit once every round or two. And, the crits aren't that big, right? It's just an extra D10. But it was just more the fact that she's pushing guys back and knocking people away from her and just never missing. Even the paladin she just couldn't miss anybody. Just attacking with advantage, and she's level 20. She's got a +6 proficiency bonus. I think she had 22 charisma because I gave her a charisma spellbook, which, by the way, the party's warlock got. I told him it was on cooldown for the next 80 years, though, because she'd already used it. But he's like, well, I'm Pact of the Undying, so I'm basically immortal. So, you know, in 80 years from now, I will have 22 charisma. I was like, fair enough, Cody. Fair enough. So yeah, Foresight, excellent spell. True Polymorph, another excellent spell. Like, this is why I say that Astral Projection is good, but I could be casting True Polymorph for Foresight. I mean, especially, once again, man, Cold Press, give me money. I am promoting your books more than you guys are. But yeah, especially if you use like third-party materials for extra monster manuals. I think each one of these books has 600 more monsters. So that's 1,200 monsters added to the monster manual and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Volos. Like, that gives you, as a player, a ton of things to choose from when you're picking what you want to polymorph into. Like, there are just... there's so many good options at that point. It's just ridiculous. So, True Polymorph, one of the best spells in the entire game. I also like Psychic Scream. There's no friendly fire on it. You just pick up the 10 targets within range. The range is like 90 feet, I believe. I just read it yesterday. It does some pretty good damage and has some nice crowd effect type of abilities. It's actually a really great spell. Now, is it as good as True Polymorph? Maybe, maybe not. But it is really, really good. And that brings me to two spells I want to specifically mention as not being very good. One of them is Imprisonment, which is absolutely terrible. And I really want to like Imprisonment because it's such a cool idea. But between like the material components and all the like particulars of the spell, it's basically just unworkable. I think that Imprisonment is cool as like a DM plot device, right? Where maybe the party has to like, they can't kill a certain foe. They have to like, you know, do these different conditions and then use the scroll with the imprisonment spell and seal them away or something like that. Like, that can make a really interesting big final confrontation with the big bad, you know? I kind of like it. It's different than just, can we do more damage to him than he does to us, right? It's like, no, this guy's too powerful. He can never be destroyed. He can never be killed. But you can imprison him just like he was once imprisoned, you know, back in the days before by some entire coalition of like ancient gods or something, whatever it was that imprisoned him in the first place. And now those ancient gods are all, you know, dead or given to infighting, or the secrets have been lost, or whatever, you know, whatever plot contrivance you have to not let the ancient gods to deal with it this time and to force your player characters to deal with it. I think Imprisonment is great for those kind of things. It is terrible to actually try to cast it, though. It is a horrible spell. The next one is Power Word Kill. Power Word Kill is nowhere near as terrible as Imprisonment. In fact, it's actually not even a bad spell. My problem with it is that it's just very ambiguous a lot of times. Like, you might not know that something has 100 or less hit points. Even if your DM is kind of charitable and gives you hints like, oh, it looks like it's half dead, or it's mostly dead. Well, if it's mostly dead, maybe Power Word Kill is massive overkill. Maybe it had 30 hit points left, and I could have just used Eldritch Blast, you know? I don't know. Maybe your DM tells you exact amounts. Oh, it has 107 left. And you're like, oh, can somebody else hit this thing? Look, oh, it has 87 hit points. You're like, boom, Power Word Kill. You know, maybe that's the circumstances. But I just feel like 100 hit points isn't that much when your party is like between 17th and 20th level. I mean, the party's fighter, if he has 4 attacks a round, could be doing 100 damage in one round. You know, I mean, especially the action surges. Ugh, don't even get me started. You know, so I mean, it's just not that much damage, all things considered. And I just feel like these other spells, especially like Foresight, True Polymorph, and Psychic Scream, they're just so much stronger and so much better. And I mean, True Polymorph is so much more versatile, you know? You need a fly spell? No problem. I'm going to turn myself into a giant dragon and take the whole party with me. Oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, whatever. I'll just turn myself into some other sort of crazy creature, you know? It's insanely good. So, it's really hard to justify Power Word Kill compared to the other options that you could have. And like I said, it's not that Power Word Kill's bad at what it does. It's fine, you know. Nothing wrong with that. The fact that it's, you know, just not as good as the other alternatives is really what I guess I'm trying to say. So anyways, those are my thoughts on it. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. And as I always say, most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. Maybe you agree with some of my choices. Maybe you disagree. That's fine too. Maybe you're like, hey, I think you're overrating this spell, or you're really underselling this spell, or you didn't even mention this spell. What the hell, you know? Sorry, I didn't mean to swear. What the heck? I have a daughter, so I try not to swear anymore. You know, it's a whole thing. She's only 3. I don't want to get in my bad habits. Anyways, but no point in recording it now. I mean, we're already. This is our 3rd or 4th attempt. It's our 4th attempt. So it's there now. Now the internet knows I swore. It's not a bad swear, but still. Anyways, that's everything. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, and by the way, next time will probably be like tonight or tomorrow when I do the pack spells. Bye.